As the pandemic continues to worsen in the U.S., Washington is looking optimistic on the possibility of passing more aid for the country. But first, Wednesday was the single deadliest day in the U.S. since the pandemic began. More than 3,100 Americans died from COVID-19. Hospitalizations also hit a record high, passing 100,000 nationwide. According to the COVID Tracking Project, that number has more than tripled since October 1st, straining hospital systems. Even as the government prepares to roll out the first batch of vaccines to healthcare workers once approved, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is warning about the months ahead.
Right now, it is so important that we recommit ourselves to this mitigation as we now begin to turn the corner with the vaccine. But the reality is December and January and February are going to be rough times. I actually believe they're going to be the most difficult time in the public health history of this nation, largely because of the stress that it's going to put on our healthcare system.
It's been more than 6 months since either chamber of Congress has passed a stimulus bill, but that sort of grim forecast seems to be pushing lawmakers toward action. Here's Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell earlier Thursday.
Now it's been heartening to see a few hopeful signs in the past few days. So compromise is within reach. We know where we agree. We can do this. Let me say it again, we can do this.
President Trump also says he's getting on board for a deal, but hasn't specified yet what he actually supports. Here he is earlier today at a Medal of Freedom ceremony for college football coach Lou Holtz.
I believe that they're getting very close to a deal. Yeah.
You'll support it?
I will, absolutely.
This may be the most important
Overall, the
speech
president appears to be
I've ever
more
made.
focused on
Figure out
attempts to
where did it
overturn
come
his
from?
election loss
But I
than
went
on the
from
pandemic.
leading
He
by a
released a
lot
46-minute-long
to losing
Facebook
by a
video
little.
Wednesday where he repeatedly made baseless accusations of voter fraud and falsely claimed President-elect Biden stole the election. Mr. Trump called it, quote, maybe the most important speech of his life. This morning, a White House official confirmed to CBS News Attorney General William Barr met with President Trump Tuesday. The source added Mr. Trump is not happy with Barr's comments about not finding enough fraud to overturn the election. For more, Ed O'Keefe and Nancy Cordes join me now. Ed is a CBS News political correspondent with the president-elect in Delaware, and Nancy is CBS News chief congressional correspondent. Welcome, Ed. As we are learning more about Attorney General Barr's White House meeting, we're seeing reports about potential preemptive pardons for President Trump's oldest children, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Is it unheard of for a president to make this kind of pardon on their way out the door?
On their way out the door, perhaps, but a preemptive pardon, no, that is not unheard of. Gerald Ford did it for Richard Nixon, after all. Beyond that, we have seen presidents help out members of their family before. I was reminded today that Bill Clinton, on his last few hours in office, granted a pardon to his half-brother, Roger Clinton, for a 1985 cocaine possession charge and some other issues that he'd had. And then just a few weeks later, his half-brother was embroiled in a congressional investigation amid reports that he had possibly been taking money from people who were trying to get his half-brother to pardon them on his way out the door. So there have been some examples of it, but nothing on the scale that the current president is considering when it comes to his children and to some of his other associates. Remember, there's still a thought that someone like Paul Manafort, his 2016 campaign manager, could be in the running for a pardon. Perhaps other associates or people that he's been made aware of or that advocates have brought attention to.
Well, Nancy, let's turn back to stimulus talks. Everyone sounds as though they want to get something done, but does that mean they will before lawmakers leave Washington again?
No, it doesn't mean that they will, although it's certainly a hopeful sign that you now have the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, actually speaking by phone about this. You wouldn't expect that to be such a momentous development, but they really haven't talked with one another, as far as we know, for months about crafting a stimulus package together. And without the two of them talking, really, this was never going to go anywhere, because there is no bill that is going to go to the Senate floor without Senator McConnell's say-so. And so they had a conversation. What we know about it is that they agreed that they both have an interest in passing some kind of relief package by the end of the year, but there are still major hurdles, particularly the fact that McConnell is still backing a $500 billion package that he says is most likely to get the president's signature, and Pelosi has now come down from her original position, but she's still at about $1 trillion. So they're separated by about $500 billion. A lot of different programs that Pelosi wants to fund that McConnell doesn't. And so whether they can overcome these differences in time to put something on the House and Senate floor before the holiday recess remains to be seen.
So, Nancy, for people who are wondering about the specifics here, what is it that they should not expect to see at this point in any kind of deal?
They should not expect to see another round of $1,200 stimulus checks unless something really unexpected happens. That just has a really high price tag, and Senate Republicans in particular don't want to spend that kind of money right now, especially when they think that the economy is about to improve. What people should expect is that there will be more loans and grants for small businesses, another package to help out ailing travel industries like the airline industry and transit systems around the country, more money for vaccine distribution. And then one of the big sticking points, Elaine, between McConnell and Pelosi is going to be whether to spend any money helping out states and local governments around the country that are having to suddenly mount this huge vaccine distribution operation in every one of their states. And that is a costly operation on top of all the other COVID mitigation that these states have been doing. Some states argue that they are going to be in the hole unless they get some help from Congress. A lot of Republicans arguing that it isn't the federal government's job to bail out these states and that is just too expensive.
So then, Ed, if that is the case, how does what's happening now with this issue of funding potentially stand to impact the incoming Biden administration?
Well, so much it remains up in the air in terms of what could sort of start to define the early days of the Biden administration. Part of it will be trying to sort out what didn't get done in a deal that is potentially passed before the holidays here that has to be addressed. And the president-elect this week has even suggested that Congress should start negotiating a more robust package even before he takes office once that new Congress begins in early January. So we'll see. That is likely to be one major factor for his domestic policy team, especially in his political operation, small p politics, as they figure out the dynamics between the White House and Congress early next year. So that'll be a big driving force. And he has said, even if Congress does get something done before, in the next 8 days or so, they should expect to do much more once he takes office, because he's going to want to go much grander and focus especially on the economic relief that workers need, that states and cities will need to pay for things like public transportation, distributing the vaccine, keeping hospitals open, etc. And so that will really have a big effect. The other big effect, and the unknown, of course, remains who wins those races in Georgia. What does that mean for the Senate? And how easy or difficult could it be to get things done for the White House?
Yeah, so many open questions right now. Ed, we are seeing a top contender for President-elect Biden's Health and Human Services Secretary pull herself out of consideration. What's going on there?
Yeah, Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo, who is somebody, one of the great mentioned people who are being mentioned for all sorts of potential positions. First, she was a contender potentially for Treasury Secretary, but then amid concerns of progressives and some work she's done in the past regarding Rhode Island's state pension system, she was pulled out of consideration for that. And now she tells our Providence station, WPRI-TV, that she is no longer allowing herself to be considered for Health and Human Services Secretary. We heard here at CBS, other outlets have reported that she was among the top contenders for that position. But in the last 12 hours, 18 hours or so, it seems she at least is announcing that she's no longer in contention. Others who are familiar with the ongoing talks confirm that she is not now a factor. So who exactly it is that's going to get one of the most high stakes and high profile positions in government, running a sprawling department with dozens of entities, billions of dollars, tens of thousands of employees, and a critical task of controlling and ending this pandemic and distributing a vaccine. You know, that's a mighty tall order for somebody. Raimondo is among those Democrats who many see as having a potential political future. It may have been that she may not want to be taking that kind of a political risk. The other factor is just that, you know, while Rhode Island is small, it's not a very large operation to run there, with all due respect to the governor. And they may be looking for somebody with much more significant either public sector or private sector management experience.
Interesting. Nancy, on these other COVID-related protections that are due to run out at the end of the year, for people who might be wondering, say, about student loan forgiveness, some of those other kinds of topics, where does Congress stand? Has there been any progress on some of those other kind of issues? I know we've been talking a lot about, obviously, those stimulus checks, but some of those other topics, has there been any sense that they've moved forward at all?
Eviction protection in particular is a really big one because there's an eviction a moratorium that is due to run out at the end of this month. And we've interviewed people who say they've already gotten warnings from their landlords saying you need to be out by the end of the month unless this moratorium gets extended. So this is a very serious issue for a lot of Americans. And the good news is that the Republicans and Democrats I've spoken to today say that they are determined to make sure that these programs do get extended for some period of time, that there is bipartisan interest in doing that in a timely fashion. The only question is, does that get attached to a must-pass spending bill by the end of the year that could come as early as next week, or does it get attached to a stimulus deal if one materializes that would also get passed in the coming weeks? Either way, I'm told by Democratic and Republican aides that this is something that is a priority for them because, you know, nobody wants to see people being thrown out of their homes right around the holidays.
Absolutely. So many people and families on that financial precipice right now. All right, Ed O'Keefe and Nancy Cordes, always great to have you both. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care.